we and we are now recording. Awesome. Oh, thank you. So this presentation is focused on the new RFP with the work-based learning that we have at the university. We are here to review the application and assist you with the process of applying and explaining the supports in the process. Please know that Dr. Roberts and I are here to support you along the way. Dr. Roberts will post the presentation in the chat box in just a moment for you to get access as needed. And let me see. We also will have, let me see our closed captioning. Has that started, Eric, on your end?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Access that as needed. If anyone attended yesterday's training presentation, just know that this is similar to that. But today we will be focusing on more of mid-level focus for those that have some experiences with work-based learning, but are kind of ready to move it on to the next level. Just know that, like I said, some of the material is very similar, but we are hoping to get into more specific questions and ideas for people who may have just a little bit more experience with, those kind of work-based learning opportunities in your area. I am going to go ahead and launch the poll. We have a poll we would like you to answer. Please let us know your role with transition and or work-based learning. You will see that has already launched. And if you all would let us know where you are from in the chat box, we would like to get an idea of who we're talking to today. At the very end or shortly before we finish, we will have a quick survey for you all to complete. And take it away. Eric, yeah, is that you next? Awesome.
No, is it me? I thought you were going to go over the beginning and then.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll do that. Go to the next slide.
I mean, I can, if you would like me to.
Oh, go for it.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm like,
we're all a little off. We have the cold front coming in and the rain and just kind of threw us off. Sorry, guys.
I'm off on like look, I just see rain.
Yeah. So today, we're just going to go over a little bit about what the start off a little bit about what the grant is and or the funding. It's not a grant, but the funding, what the project is and what we do. And then we'll launch into TransCen and I'll go over some much more details about work-based learning. And so just to know, like, the work-based learning project is a new project that we have at Texas A&M University for the Center for Disability and Development. We it's funded through Texas Workforce, and it's a really, a very exciting program for us and for everyone. I mean, the whole idea is we want to, equip schools throughout all of Texas to create and or improve their work-based learning models. And so again, we'll go more over what that is, but we have funds available up to $10,000. And we know that that's quite a bit, and that can really help out a lot of programs. And we'll go over some more of kind of like ideas of how you can spend that money, but realize that like you don't have to spend 10,000. Maybe you need 1,000, maybe you need 5,000, maybe whatever it is that you might need. That is what you can apply for. It doesn't have to be that $10,000. Oops, can you go back? And then also part of that, whenever we're going to have some technical support too with that. So whenever you get approved for the funds, we'll start providing technical support, and that's gonna we're looking at that for everybody. It's kind of like a tiered level of support, similar to how we're doing this series. We're going to have a group that we know that you have quite a lot of experience. Maybe you have several programs already going. Maybe you've been doing this for years with those programs and those models. You're just really looking to like, how can I expand on this? How can I do more? How can we, so we'll talk a bit about that. Well, actually, we talked about that more yesterday, but then we kind of a mid-level group, which is the group that maybe they're here today and you've been doing some stuff. Maybe you have some school-based enterprise, and maybe you want to be able to expand on that. Maybe you're getting out in the community, doing some job experiences, but you really would like to be doing more and getting out there more, but maybe you need some funds to get that started, some technical support to get that started. That's what we're here for. And then also we have those groups, a lot of them that are kind of more of those rural areas that, they have a lot of great ideas, a lot of things they want to do. They just don't really have those foundations in place to be able to start to get these get these going. And so we're going to have a level that's helping out those. And you don't have to be rural, but just, we don't really have a lot going on. And we're really just trying to get started, get those foundations, and get moving. And so we're going to have a level of support for those guys, those schools. And so, yeah, I mean, that's essentially it. I mean, there's an application process. We'll go over a little bit more of that towards the end. And know that we're here. The whole idea behind it is we want you to get this money. We want you to get the support. I mean, that is what we're not trying to find ways to limit you, to limit who can get the support, to limit, how much we're giving out. I mean, we have a good amount of money, and we have a lot of ambition to really spread this out and get it to everybody. And so we're here to help you as much as possible. We'll talk a bit more about this as we go on, but, like if you're working on your application and you have some questions, you're not quite sure, like, are you answering this right? Or, hey, let's just kind of run through some more ideas. And what do you think? I mean, that's what Jackie and I are here for. We'll be, through email, we can meet through, we can have phone call, we can meet through Zoom, whatever works for you and your team to kind of get those applications going and get them where you want them and where we kind of maybe need them to be, which again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. You want to go to the next slide. And so work-based learning, what is it? It's an authentic work environment, and that can mean lots of different things. And Sean and Dale will talk more about that. And I just have that underline. We have that underline, the authentic work environment. And the only reason why we don't have a lot of stipulations around a lot of barriers or what we can't do. But one of the things we can't do a self-contained environment where you're working on skills. So like maybe you have your work boxes within your classroom and you're not really involving in community, not getting out. That's not something we can support. But as long as it's truly working on, we're working on those job skills, and we really want, at the end of the day, all this to be leading towards actual jobs, right? And so we know that can be a continuum of services. We start off with working on those soft skills and then hard skills, and then eventually in the end, we want them all to be employed. And that is the grand vision of work-based learning, the grand vision of this program as well for you and your districts. And if you've received some funding before, that doesn't disqualify. If, hey, you're wanting to, we have a good idea, but we don't know the whole idea. Well, we're here for years. And so apply now with what you got, and then we can continue to expand on it. Plus, as we're helping you, when we're working together after you receive those funds, maybe we see that you do have something and we'll be able to help out with that to help expand it during that time. So I will stop talking about this, but please let us know about questions. I think we'll take questions in the chat. At the very end, we'll have hopefully about 15-20 minutes or so to answer questions and go over things at that end. If you have a question now, you can put it into the chat, and we'll make sure we answer them towards the end. But then again, then we can also do some unmuting and that sort of thing. So I'm not sure we had mentioned that. But all right, I will stop. I'm going to pass it on to Sean and Dale and just let you know that we are very excited about Sean and Dale being here at TransCen and going back and forth between these slides. So we're partnering with them with a lot of our technical support. And if you don't know who they are, let's talk a little bit more about that. But they are a nationwide leading support group, experts in work-based learning and helping students with disabilities get jobs. And so that's who they are and why they're here. And we're excited to learn more about what they're going to talk to us about and help you learn and the whole stuff. I'm going to stop rambling. I'm going to pass it on to Sean and Dale. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Good to be here with all you good folks from Texas this morning. I'm going to start out by asking my partner in crime, Sean, to introduce himself. And Sean, after you do that, if you could just spend a little bit on our organization, TransCen, and kind of what we're about.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Dale, and thank you, Eric and Jackie. We appreciate being able to be here and being able to partner in this project. What a cool opportunity for school districts and teams in the state of Texas to be able to get this money and build capacity. I think it's really great. And it's fun to be a part of. My name is Sean Roy. I'm with an organization called TransCen, which is short for Transition Center. We're a national not-for-profit training and technical assistance organization. And as Eric mentioned, we are focused on promoting meaningful work and community inclusion. And a lot of the work that we do is centered around building the capacity of school teams and employment services to serve people with disabilities in employment, including students. And so we're very glad to be here. Our organization is about 35 years old, and we've got multiple arms. I operate the training and technical assistance arm. We also do direct employment services in Maryland, San Francisco, and Milwaukee. So we learn a lot from those direct services that we apply to the presentations that we give. And then we're also involved in research, having been involved in the last 3 very significant transition research projects. And again, that's where we get a lot of our information. Our organization is located in Rockville, Maryland. Dale and I work remotely. I am coming to you from my basement outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. So don't talk to me about cold fronts. And then Dale is coming to you from holding down the Madison, Wisconsin office of TransCen. And so our website, we've got a learning management system where we have a ton of training available for people. And then you could always just contact us if you had any questions, and our emails are going to be at the end of the presentation as well. But just know our focus is very clearly on helping you achieve what we consider to be quality work-based learning. And throughout the presentation, you're going to hear what we mean by that. So I'll throw it back to Dale to get us going.
Great. Yeah, so just in terms of an introduction, I've been involved with employment for people with disabilities for just going on probably 35 years myself. And we do a lot, Sean and I do a lot of work with school districts in states that want to do pilots or demonstration types of projects around transition. And it's one of the more favorite things that we like to do, especially when we can get on site and really kind of get really specific about some of the students and what the potential is for them, working directly with you all and your teams to really engage employers and engage the families in these efforts. And so in the next slide, you'll see that today what we're going to cover is first of all, kind of a 30,000 foot view. You know, what does the literature tell us? What does the evidence show in terms of what is effective when it comes to transition programs, work-based learning, and the importance of these work experiences? We'll also talk about how, because good legislation is based on evidence and the studies that have been done. And so we want to kind of give you a sense of that. Where is this field going? What is the legislation steering us towards when it comes to the resources that are being made available by both the federal and state government? And then ultimately, you know, what does optimal transition services look like? And we think that, and we're going to try to make the case for these studies, this legislation, is pointing us towards best practices. And so we want to help define what that is. You'll hear about how the studies reinforce the notion of the importance of family involvement. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to be drilled down on what work experiences are, both the importance of them, what are the different types, and what are the quality characteristics of effective work experiences. And we're hoping that all of that will help inform your thinking and ultimately influence your applications to Texas A&M for these resources. We're gonna get towards the end of the webinar, talk about different models that have some evidence in terms of their efficacy. And then we're also going to talk about interagency roles and responsibilities, because that is something that they're looking at when they review your applications. You know, what is there a team? What's a commitment to what it is you're trying to do? And then we know some of you are really going to focus on the use of social enterprises as part of this application. And so we want to kind of take all the information that you're going to hear before that and kind of pull it together to kind of tell you, okay, if you're going to do social enterprises as part of your transition program or as part of your work-based learning efforts, what does success look like? What are the characteristics of success for that? And we'll finish up with what's available through Sean and I at TransCen in terms of technical assistance that you might be able to access after you were awarded your grant. After that, as Eric said, we'll get back to your questions. I think they also want to kind of give you a little bit more specifics on the application process and what they're looking for. And then we just wanted to kind of handle all your questions, but you don't have to wait to the end. If you have any comments, if you have any questions as we go along, please just put it into the chat box, and folks will be monitoring that. And we're more than happy to stop and kind of address this as we go along. But first, the literature review. And what does it say? Well, it says the study here, it talks about the real kind of the momentum that is starting to take place in terms of education outcomes being about employment. And I think that drum is getting beaten louder and louder as we go along. The next study that we're going to highlight talks about children and youth 15 to 18 that are in special education, and it studied the rising expectations that is taking place for these students when it comes to exiting from your transition programs in the school system. And I think that's really an exciting piece of information, because I think, and you'll hear more about this later, but what we think is one of your biggest challenges is the expectation, the low expectations of both, not only the families that might sometimes thwart your efforts to help achieve employment for some of these folks because of their issues and concerns, but also the youth themselves. I mean, after even though it's a short lifetime, after a lifetime of being told about your disability, all of a sudden we're kind of throwing things at them like, well, you know, what do you want to do? What, are you going to be employed? And it's sometimes hard for these folks to envision that. And so we're going to talk about expectations and the role that this plays in really helping to raise expectations for these youth for themselves in terms of what's important. The next study really kind of gets into this notion of who is achieving employment and who isn't. And sadly, reflects a high unemployment rate for the persons with disabilities, 60%. That needle hasn't moved much since in the 35 years that I've been doing this work. And that is a constant point of consternation for me, because I obviously think that number is just bogus. And the potential for that number to be lower is so high. And all these folks that we support have so much opportunity or potential for making contributions in the workplace. And this notion of coordination and focus on the outcomes of transition programs. There seems to be evidence there that there is a lack of coordination and a coordinated effort to really achieve these transition outcomes that we're going to kind of encourage you to consider throughout this webinar. The next study really kind of looked at the two factors that predicted outcomes for employment, and those were 2 or more work experiences while in high school, and the role of networks and the fact that networking is very important. And that's something for you all to really pay close attention to. And of course, the grant itself is really an effort to encourage these 2 or more job experiences. And I want to make the distinction between a work experience and a job experience. A work experience is, for example, something that you might be able to achieve within the school that you're working with. A job experience also implies that experience is with employers. And so that's something that you need to keep in mind, because when you are able to involve actual employers in your work experiences or job experiences, that really is that better predictor of employment outcomes. And every youth, every family that you work with, they have networks that can be accessed on behalf of those youth to really make opportunities come to fruition. And so that's something to keep in mind. So work experience and employment preparation, paid or unpaid, is where we see the most frequently substantiated practices, which is an indication of the number of studies that support this. So really, everything is pointing us towards the real impact of what it is we do is based on the success of these work experiences and true employment preparation. So what you're going to hear from us is you really need to think about those concrete steps or path to employment. And we think the IEPs that are developed for students really need to articulate that. And what you're going to be trying to put in place with this work-based learning really can help foster that concrete set of steps towards employment outcomes, either before or hopefully directly after their involvement with you through the transition program. So family involvement was another study that was done that demonstrated, that substantiated that involvement is key, and it enhances the students' academic achievements. And so we hear a lot when we work with schools that families can be a deterrent. Families can be a challenge that needs to be overcome. And yet what we also see, and I think this study reinforced, is the fact that they can also be a key partner and bring resources and they really can reinforce any of the education or work experiences that you're trying to achieve for them while they're in school. A lot of that can be reinforced at home. And so we really want you to try to see that it's important to try to have them be a resource and partner in what you're trying to do with your transition efforts. So what do these highlight? They highlight the importance of employment training in the work experience as well in high school. The role of families and parents when it particularly comes to the expectations around employment, and really encouraging and helping these youth see what they may be able to achieve when it comes to a career once they exit school. A career awareness, those high school experiences, any kind of vocational training that they can get post-high school are all strong predictors of a successful outcome. And we define successful outcomes as having employment again, either before or directly after their involvement with your transition program. So when it comes to legislation, what we've seen is that these studies are being paid attention to, and that what the legislation and policies in the United States recently have been encouraging and supporting is better post-secondary education outcomes for youth, which is an outcome of a successful outcome of a transition program as well. Improved employment outcomes, increased access and participation in community life. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but the WIOA, Workforce and Innovation and Opportunity Act, it really has kind of laid down the law that these kids cannot go from a transition program into a segregated day or a workshop type of environment. And if that is not an option, or let's put it this way, when it was an option, it made for very short, very simple IEPs. Person's going to leave school and they're going to attend this particular community rehabilitation program and participate in their workshop or their day program. But now it's the expectation is that they access the community and that they have services that are more individualized to them, whether it's employment related or whether it's just related to how they're supported during their day when they're not working. And that there is an effort ultimately to achieve less reliance on these federal entitlements. So if that's what's happening, then policies tend to. So you've got studies, you've got legislation, and then out of all of that comes policies at the state and in some cases local level. And there are now more states that are employment first states than are not. And what that really means is, as you can see up there, based on APSE's statement of employment first, is that it's the first and preferred outcome. So instead of youth when they are starting to achieve or receive adult related services, they needed to opt into employment. They had to overtly make sure that employment was in their plan and some sort of justification as to how and why employment was in their plan. Now with employment first, particularly in employment first states, you have to opt out. And there's a presumption that employment should be considered for each and every person that receives disability-related supports. And if that person or the family doesn't want that as an option to be supported through their plan, then they have to opt out of a consideration for employment. What is employment? Well, I think also Employment First does a nice job of defining that as individualized, not group or enclave, integrated, which means it's not in amongst only or mostly people with disabilities. It is part of a payroll of a business or self-employment, and their wages are at or above minimum wage. So that also helps define what could be the desired outcome of your transition programs. It's a good definition. So what does it take to make all of that happen? Work experiences early and often, and that's where this grant opportunity we think is really important. Paid work before school exit, that is what, particularly for Sean and I, that's what we think is a worthy goal for any transition program, is to try to achieve paid employment on behalf of as many of the folks that you support as is possible before they exit school. And these work experiences, that's where that solid line to an employer is really important, and where you really have the opportunity to use these resources to help create that movement towards paid work. And that those connections to the ongoing supports that are needed post school are not considered only after they exit school, but are identified and made available to the youth and their families before they're exiting your transition programs. What else does it take? It takes employers. They are a key transition partner because ultimately they're the ones holding the opportunities of paid employment out in the community. So to know who they are and to figure out a way to partner with them is important. And later in this webinar, we're going to talk specifically about what it takes to partner with employers. What do they need out of this in order for them to be an effective partner with your school system? Youth and family empowerment, and Sean will talk a little bit more about that. That's key. And then ultimately, there has to be a consistent message and an effort to heighten expectations of, first and foremost, for the youth themselves, but also with the family. But I would also say with staff, everybody on a transition team really has to be on the same page, and maybe you have to have some hard and important conversations about that. Do you feel that there is a presumption of employment for everybody that you support in your special ed programs? If not, why? Because that leaks out, that perspective leaks out and really does deter high expectations on behalf of these folks. So that's what we think it takes to make it happen, and are things that we're hoping that you'll consider in your transition programs and help define with your applications for this opportunity. And then I mentioned it earlier, but what are the most important factors for employers is this notion of helping them make money, save money, or operate more efficiently. And even though that may, seem like a duh, when it comes to, that's what for-profit businesses are always about. Where I think it's not a duh is, do you as a school system see yourselves as being able to offer them opportunities to make money, save money, and operate more efficiently? And that's where I think Sean and I really feel very strongly about and really want to help you understand. What we find is when we interview employers who are involved with transition programs and offer work experiences, a lot of times the approach to those employers and the reasons that they are partnering with you is because they feel like they're helping the school system out. They're helping the schools out. They're helping kids with disabilities out. They see themselves as being a good community citizen. But what we find is that is not sustainable, or it's not as effective when it comes to making that transition to paid employment. If they see that they're doing you a favor, then they really are seeing themselves as just helping people with disabilities and may not even be seeing them as potential employees for their own businesses, even when they're offering these work experiences. Whereas if they can say to you, you're helping my business in the ways that are up on the screen, that is a motivation that will ultimately lead to a sustainable employer partnership. So we'll talk more about that later, or a lot of our technical assistance also really tries to help work with you in terms of how to better approach employers and how to more effectively partner with them. And these work experiences that you want this money for really can be a great catalyst to really achieve those effective partnerships with employers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Sean, to go over the next set of slides.
Thank you, Dale. I want to just reinforce or remind people that we've got the chat box, and we're going to be asking for questions at the end, not only regarding the information that we've presented on, but the information there and questions you have related to the application and the funding. So we'd love to hear any reactions to anything that's being said. You can, it's kind of fun real time to you disagree or agree with what we're saying, but I hope that you see that we're trying to make the case, as Dale said, for a certain type of focus on work-based learning that really creates a clear and connected path to employment. A lot of times what we see is there's work-based learning, it's somewhat scattered, it's somewhat stagnant. People, you take groups of kids to the same work sites that you've been taking them to for 10, 15 years. It's not individualized. And we're really hoping with these funds that you're going to consider, how do you build capacity to do a work-based learning program and have it involve the components that we're talking about today. So, Dale gave just a wonderful research and legislation base for this idea that we know that work is good, and we know that that's what benefits students, and we know that's the direction we're going. So what have we learned? This idea of optimum transition services, gold standard of transition programs, really include this idea of empowering youth, and we've not touched on that very much here today. But what we as adults still have the habit of making decisions and holding meetings without youth. I think that goes back to the expectations piece. So we need to find a way to empower youth to be able to drive the bus eventually. We're going to talk more about family involvement and supports here in a little bit. This idea of aligning academic preparation and work experiences, that they don't have to be separate. We've heard in the past how sometimes people, even families, are saying, well, I want my kid to focus more on academics and not on transition and work experiences. Maybe thinking that the focus on academics would help get them into college or whatever the case is, but we need to find a way to pair the two, because the two are linked, right? You need the skills, math skills, reading skills, technology skills, problem solving skills to be able to be effective in the workplace. And really, optimum transition services require early connections to post-secondary services, not waiting until an 18 to 21 program to connect people to the services that they may need, excuse me, and understanding that not all students are going to need services, that our job is not just to automatically shunt students into services. Not all students need vocational rehabilitation to be employed as adults, but we need to explore those options early so those options are understood and connected before a student leaves high school. And then certainly work, as many meaningful work experiences as we can give a student before they leave high school can only benefit them. But where's it going? This is maybe small part speculation, small part inference from what the legislation is saying, what the trends are that we're seeing at TransCen. But in the future, we're building towards, again, this idea of linking work-based learning models and transition models to academic instruction, that they don't have to be two separate things. That the transition models that require collaboration, and I'm talking, maybe interagency collaboration between employment providers, vocational rehabilitation, and education. I'm talking collaboration with employers, talking about collaboration with post-secondary education. Schools are not solely responsible for just running transition programs themselves, and to try to do so is really ignoring a lot of the extra resources that could be brought to bear. Employer-led initiatives is another future direction. And really, a great part of this work-based learning project is the necessity to have some kind of link to community employers. And Erica, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that is one of the requirements, right? That they have to show some kind of linkage to the community employers.
To the community, yeah. I mean, and so ultimately, yeah, sure. I mean, someone that can speak into employment, but they do have to have a connection to the community with their teams. And so I think Jackie will cover a little bit more about that, but yes, you're right.
Perfect, thank you. And how many of your work-based learning projects right now currently have connections to employers? And if not, ask yourself why. And another question I would ask you is, does your school have a CTE program? And I'm guessing that CTE program has a strong link to employers, local businesses, local career paths. And the reason it does is because you need employers to be able to drive a CTE program. Well, maybe we need to start thinking that you need employers to drive a quality work-based learning program as well. And this idea of training transition professionals, which is near and dear to my heart. And as I said yesterday, you in Texas have wonderful resources for support in transition. You have Texas A&M, you have the transition TA project out of Sam Houston State. You've got a transition conference every year that's amongst the best in the country. You have a great structure with the education service systems and the regions. We need to be able to train people to do these things appropriately, because we do not train people to do these things pre-service. We're asking them to figure this out kind of on the fly. So let's do a little bit better job of training our staff on job development, on engaging employers, on engaging families, on empowering youth. Those are all training aspects that we can use also to really bolster our work-based learning projects. So my main focus a lot of the time ends up being family engagement. I'm the brother of a younger sibling who has intellectual disabilities, and that's really what brings me to this work, is a belief that that families really are the best, most knowledgeable and consistent case manager that a student is going to have, the biggest champion that a student is going to have. And we need to interact with families and engage families in this process in a respectful way, right? A lot of times we want to engage families by asking, well, what do we need families to do for us to make sure that our jobs are being done better? And we need to think like two sides of the coin, which is, what do families need from us? And what do we need from families? This idea that Dale brought up about raising expectations is big, because if you're a family member, especially of a student with significant disabilities, you have not gotten positive messages about what your student is going to achieve in their future life. And so we come along and say a job in the community is possible and going to college is possible. And well, it's counterintuitive to what their initial reactions are, which is safety and security and being apprehensive about the future. So we need to start early in our elementary schools and middle schools to set messaging about that transition is possible, work is possible. This is a unified effort. Anybody who's on the call, even if you're not going to apply for these funding, you can do this right away. You can start changing your messaging to families and saying work in the community for everybody is possible, and start involving them in that goal, that common goal, that what we're doing during this transition program is preparing your son or daughter for work. And that is going to involve a quality work experience or a paid job. And that's what we're working towards. And here's how you can help. I think a lot of times transition programs don't do that. They don't outline what the expectation is for families. And so families go in not knowing what's happening. And I think, you're more likely to buy in if you're just told right off the bat, this is what we're doing. And in that assessment process, in especially for students with higher support needs that require maybe more of a customized approach, you utilize what families know about them, about what they know about their community. And really, they can truly be a partner and help you improve your outcomes. And then it's our job to connect them to supports, not just the usual suspects too, things like benefits planning. A lot of families get their kids on Social Security and then have some pretty outdated ideas about what that means in terms of employment. So we need to connect them and get them good information so they can make informed decisions on behalf of their son or daughter, or help their son or daughter make the decisions, which is ideally the better situation. And then training our staff on how to interact with families better, and really making that an expectation that we interact with families, involve them in this process. Because I still think there are a lot of times when we would prefer not to deal with families. And that's really that's not even reasonable. When you're dealing with a student, when you're dealing with a minor or even a young adult, you have to involve families. Anytime you're working with people, you're working with families. So Dr. Rich Luking is a co-founder of TransCen and recently retired from the University of Maryland, a former policy advisor for the Office of Disability Employment Policy, and really a great thinker when it comes to student employment work experiences. And this is what, he basically outlines. He just kind of lays it out. The most important predictor of post-school employment for youth with disabilities is whether or not they achieve some type of work experience, either paid, ideally paid prior to school exit. So just breaking that down, it's saying students are going to have better employment outcomes as adults if we can help facilitate quality work experience during their high school years. Therefore, there's no reason for us not to do that. And it should be the focus of our efforts, of our transition efforts. What are we doing in transition programs if we're not focusing on facilitating work experiences for students? Because this is one of the few things that we know for sure. This is research supported. We get students work experiences connected to what it is that they want to do, and that's going to lead to better outcomes. So there's your justification. There's your pitch to your administration. It really shouldn't be any more complicated than that. By bolstering work experiences, we are going to improve the chances that our students are going to have successful employment lives after they leave high school. And I think that is, you know, that is the goal. That is outcomes focused transition. And we know work experiences benefit students and youth too, but here's from Rich Luking's book, The Way to Work. He lists some of the benefits of students, of work experiences for students and youth. And I think, you know, what I have found, because I've had the privilege of working in Texas a lot. I've been in Texas working with some of your education service centers and have presented at your transition conference. In fact, I'm doing a session tomorrow for the institute that is happening on family engagement. So my session's on family engagement. There's a transition institute tomorrow and I'm doing a session on there. So I've always found that you people in Texas have a commitment to students. That's what I have found. And so I don't need to make the case that work is good for students. It's all listed right here. But if you've seen firsthand the empowerment, the sense of accomplishment a student gets by earning a paycheck, by learning a new skill, by being asked what it is that they want to do and having adults honor that and help them, that's incredible. And that's our job. That's our job in terms of transition services, to really honor that and understand that work experiences is not a box to check. Work experiences benefit students and youth way beyond and for a lifetime, beyond what it is that we could probably even imagine.
Hey, Sean, before you
Yep.
move into the next slide, we did get a in the chat, Nancy was asking, just curious as to how many students in your work-based programs, hang on a second, work-based programs, I lost it, something else.
It says, need assistance with toileting, feeding, communication, and if so, how are you helping those students to be successful, or do they attend a different program at school?
Yeah,
So I think
Eric, you want to jump on that, or you want to?
I mean, I think that's maybe a question for some of the other schools. I mean, I know that everyone kind of handles that differently. You know, we're talking a lot about high expectations, and I think that's a big part of it. I know that whenever I was working in the school district, you know, my repetitive thing, you know, I would say all the time is let's set the students up to surprise us, right? Let's put them out there and let's see what they can do to surprise us. And I think the same thing for the community too. Let's set them up to surprise us, you know, and so trying to have those high expectations. But I mean, that's kind of a question for some of the districts to answer, you know, what they're doing. I think it varies by district on what they're doing and how they're addressing the students with and then we have another one of the biggest obstacles is students with behavior issues. And, you know, and these definitely can be barriers, and it's something that we have to look at and to address, you know. And then a couple other questions we have in here, we're going to address a couple of these, you know, talking about transportation and how, yeah, we can, you know, during school, you know, you live in a rural area, you can get the students to these work sites, but once they graduate, or, you know, once they leave school, how are they getting to their jobs? And you know, and that's a man, I mean, we hear that a lot, right? And so one of my thoughts are, you know, not everybody has a car that lives in your town, you know, and so how are they getting to these jobs? You know, maybe start asking some of them and how that's working out. But I mean, these are all definitely huge obstacles. You're not saying anything that a lot of other people aren't facing, and, you know, and kind of asking these questions. And you're welcome, you know, other people from other districts, if you have some of these answers, some things that you've been doing, you know, answer in the chat, that'd be really helpful. And then another question, I have parents that do not want their young adults to obtain a job because they feel they will lose their SSI benefits. Right. Yeah. I mean, again, another very common issue. And it's just a matter of repetition, you know, just continually saying, you know, to the parents, you know, there's no way to make less money by working than not working, you know, and kind of having those repetitions. And in Texas workforce, you know, if there's anybody on here, if you can, I know they used to have these Smurfs and they would give trainings to parents and then actually go through that whole thing and being able to discuss, you know, in a better way of how they won't ever lose their benefits. So
Yeah.
those are some, if you want to continue addressing them.
What I'd add to what you said, Eric, is that what I think is important in these issues, because every one of the things that you brought up is a potential barrier or challenge to effective to achieve what it is we've been encouraging you to achieve in this webinar, which is out in the community at employer sites. But what I would really encourage you is to not let the potential lack of supports be a deterrent for you to even consider employment. Because if you go to, okay, they have this behavior, therefore we're not going to consider it, then you really are feeding into lower expectations based on a challenge. And it is just that, it's a challenge. I'm not saying it's an easy one. Toileting, I mean, they're going to need supports, and they're going to need sometimes a level of care out in the community that is going to be harder to replicate than in the school. And yet, is it a deal breaker? You won't know until you try. And I think for Sean or I or anybody to kind of give you the answer to a behavior or a need for toileting or feeding is really going to not be very effective. But if you consider and continue to try to move forward with this, a lot of times a potential solution may appear. Or you are able to replicate those supports while they're in school, and your concern is what happens when they're not in school. Well, if you can already demonstrate what success looks like in school with those more intensive supports, you can be making the case for when they're transitioning to adult that those same levels of support are necessary. If you have somebody in a job with very expensive supports successfully, that's still going to be a much more, you're going to have a VR agency, or if they're eligible for Medicaid waiver funds, a case manager that would much rather deal with that problem. Okay, I have intensive supports that I need to provide, but the person has employment and wants to be there, and the employer wants them to be there, than for us to theoretically continue to wring our hands over how we're going to provide those supports. And so I'd say keep moving forward with each and every one of these folks and try to figure out the supports as you go. Will the lack of supports cause some of these placements not to take place? Absolutely. But don't stop. Don't let those assumptions or those concerns slow you down.
Yeah, and one, I guess, a couple other thoughts I had while you were talking too, if I can remember. One, the communication issue and the supports on the site. You know, that's one of the things that the grant, our funding, okay, keep calling it a grant, we've got to call it funding, but can provide that supports. Because I know sometimes, you know, we have our technology, and if we could just get them, have that technology on the site, get it out there with them, you know, then that's something that could have the support they need, the AT, those other devices, those things that could give them. And that's one way to address that to some extent. And then another thing, you know, like whenever, you know, anybody that has a project search or anything like that, you know, once you kind of get them onto like a real authentic job site where there's real authentic expectations, students will step up, you know. And so we've often kind of gone with that idea of like, you know, we've had so many students that, man, I love what I used to do when I was at the schools. The beginning of every year when we had our big event where all the teachers were there, I'd bring back some students of like that had outcomes that you wouldn't expect from because of what you'd seen from them in the classroom, you know, this behavior, these things. But the reality is once they kind of get out there and they have real expectations, you know, and they're really, you know, and they really start in those authentic environments, you're going to see them step up more. And I think that's a big part of it, because we replicate these things and they know that, you know, and they feel that. But whenever we can have like this job, this employer, this people are genuinely relying on you to get something done, they'll often step up, and you'll see some of that behavior lessen or even sometimes go away. I mean, but you can still have those supports there for them. But that's another thing that we know. I mean, oftentimes having those expectations of what this is going to look like, it doesn't look like it when you get them on a real job, you know. Sorry, I'm not crying. I'm just, my voice is going out.
You know, these are all great questions, and these are common questions. And we're not here to purport that we've got the answer to everything. I love what Dale said, which is do not let the potential level of support screen out essentially a student for being considered for a work experience. That it's just not, that's not where we're at right now. That's not what we need to be doing. We need to be creative, and we need to be collaborative. And we need to, instead of saying we can't do it, we need to say, how are we going to make this happen for this student? Each student that you have crossing your path is going to have individual needs, and work is going to look different for everybody. We're not, what we mean by work experiences, we're going to go over it. Maybe that it is, somewhat limited due to a complicated health issue, but it's our job to get kids out into work experiences that they choose so they can practice the careers that they are picking. And doing so collaboratively, and bringing together the partners. And that's one of the pieces of technical assistance that we could offer, is to say, hey, do we need to have some kind of a planning activity with local partners to say, how do we bolster transportation? How do we work with maybe whatever additional supports that this young person might have, so they can have a nurse with them or a paraprofessional with them that might take care of toileting needs if toileting is a need. So I love the questions, though, because it means that you guys are thinking about it, right? And that's awesome.
Yeah, and Sean, one last thing is that we are not assuming that you are ruling anybody out either. And then we don't want you to think that we thought that based on your questions. We know we get these questions on a regular basis. Those are good questions. And so please don't think we're judging that in any sort of way. We're really glad that you're bringing it up. And we know that it's on a case-by-case basis. But I just wanted to say that because we want to continue to encourage your input. And
well, for sure.
And we're not thinking that for you all.
No, these are the tough questions and conversations we need to have, and to make it work. But as long as we're all pointed in the same direction, which is, we're going to be creative and we're going to figure this out. So moving forward with this, and I love the fact that we had that little interlude, and keep them coming in the chat box, and the reactions too in the chat box. It's also work experiences are important. We know that you as transition programs have compliance measures and legal requirements and things that you worry about. And work experiences help you meet those measures. They help you develop more meaningful IEPs. They help you address the outcome indicators through IDEIA. Indicator 2 is the dropout indicator. Right. So if you have quality work experiences and students are engaged, they might be less likely to drop out. Indicator 13 is the percentage of IEPs that are assessment based and have post-secondary goals rooted in employment and post-secondary education. And indicator 14 is 1 year after exit, the number of students who are enrolled in post-secondary education, working, or both. These are things that we're held accountable to, and work-based learning helps you be able to meet those goals. And now we know with WIOA that VR agencies and schools are required to increase their collaboration, to have a local memorandum of understanding. And that's why having a TWC at the table for all of you, I think, is so important, because they tend to be the gatekeepers for a lot of these conversations and these types of services. So when we talk about work experiences, though, let's talk about specifically what we mean. And again, a lot of this is common knowledge, but we're talking everything from career exploration activities. So helping a young person really dig into, do I like this? I think I want to be a video game designer, but do they truly know what a video game designer does? And that means visiting a workplace. That means doing an information interview, which is, if they, let's say that they want to be a landscaper, that we find them a landscaper and sit down for a half hour and go, tell me, how did you get into this? What type of education did you need? What type of skills or trade school did you go to? Do you like it? What don't people know about being a landscaper that maybe they assume? Job shadowing. Hey, can I come in and be a fly on the wall? Can I watch for a day, what it is that you do here. And I think that's important because, students will make assumptions about job careers that they might be interested in, but until we give them the opportunity to really see what it is that is done on a daily basis, they won't know for sure if that's something they really want to explore. Work sampling is the idea of taking job tasks and learning specific aspects of what it is those job tasks would be required in the workplace, and also learning the soft skills, like social problem solving, and things like that. How do we navigate the social world in a work environment, as well as learning how to do the tasks. Service learning I think is underutilized, and what a great idea. A work program could put together a service learning project where kids not only learn how to do things, which would be, maybe delivering meals, maybe helping people, maybe helping people mow lawns and maintain their yards, or a community garden. But then they're being connected to their communities, and they're learning that your work efforts can be for yourself, but also you can use it to be connected and be part of your community as a citizen. And a lot of times, if you're with like the National Honor Society, it's a condition of graduation. So it can be structured in that way. Internships are a little bit more formal, as you guys know, but they tend to be specific tasks over a predetermined time. It's almost like a little mini job for an internship in the summer. But, we check with your local workforce center to see if there's any internship type of programs, or the American Job Centers now, to see if there's any type of internships. Apprenticeships are seen as more aligned with the trades. And they tend to be more formally structured. But this is a big deal, I think, because we've not done a very good job of helping students with disabilities access the trades. And there's been kind of a barrier there that we've not yet totally been able to cross for certain students, because there's always this perceived academic capability that they point to and say, well, if they can't pass the test, then they can't blah, 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 blah. And we need to figure out ways that young people could be involved in being a plumber, or be involved in a trade. I think there's a lot of work to be done there. Stipend types of jobs are often in customized situations and done through employment agencies. And then, the best type of work experience is paid employment. And I tell families a lot too, there's nothing that says that if you've got a student of a certain age and they just want a job, you just go out and help them get a job. One of my favorite stories is I heard of a family who had a young man with Down syndrome, and the young man wanted a job. And one day the young man just walked out of the house, and it wasn't uncommon for him to go walking around the community, but he had been gone for quite some time. And he comes back and they said, well, where did you go? And he said, well, I went to go get a job. And he walked down to the grocery store and he asked the person for a job, and he ended up securing, an interview for that. So sometimes we just need to get out of our own way and say, all right, this kid wants a job. How do we facilitate this? But, a lot of times we're talking about students with higher support needs. Not all work experiences are created equal. And so there are some characteristics of some quality work experiences. And as you look at this list, I also want you to think about your applications, because this is a great list, a set of benchmarks for you to be able to say, does my proposed project or program involve these quality work experience characteristics? And so what we want to avoid is just people thinking, well, we toured this facility and they worked in the school cafeteria, so there's our two work experiences. They need to be individualized. They need to have clear goals. There needs to be clear expectations. It needs to involve skill building. It needs to involve on-the-job learning, and there needs to be a range of opportunities for students. So what are you going to do if a student comes to you wanting a work experience or to do something that's outside of your network or outside of what you've done before. How are you going to facilitate that? Hopefully it involves having mentors on the work site that could not only provide natural supports, but be kind of a guide to that student to say, hey, this is what we do here and this is how we do that. And then always good documentation. You know, how did the youth feel about the work experience? How did the employer feel about it? How did the process go? Are we getting better at this? So as you put together your applications, think about, do your current work-based learning projects include these things? So I'm going to turn it back over to Dale quickly to be able to talk about some national models that we know are effective.
Okay, before I get into these models, I want to try something. You see Richard Luking's name a lot on the bottom of this. And part of the reason for that is that some of this has come from The Way to Work, which is a publication that came out of Brooks. It's now just recently had a second edition. And it's a great resource. Strongly encourage all of you to consider getting that publication. The last 2/3 of the book is very practical about how to set up these work experiences and lots of tools that you can use. So I think you would find it very beneficial. But it also happens to be Rich's birthday today. And so I had this fun idea that since he's contributing to this webinar, you could really thank him by wishing him a happy birthday today. So I put his email address in the chat box. So if any or all of you are willing, I just think it'd really be a fun thing to do to have all of you wish him a happy birthday today from all these good folks in Texas, where he'd be like, what the heck is going on? So I'm not going to tell him, and I'm just going to see if he happens to mention it at some point in the future. So there's his email address, lukingr@gmail.com. And just want to throw that out there for any of you who are willing to kind of share some love today. Okay, the transition models that work. There's 3 of them. These all have evidence and have been studied and have shown to have some efficacy. In other words, impact on an ongoing basis based on their design. And so I think the important thing for you all is, what are the design elements of these successful transition models? And you've heard about that already in some of the slides, but one of them is the Bridges program. It was started by the Marriott Foundation. It is not specific to Marriott hotels or Marriott businesses. The foundation is separate, and they are focused on education, including education for people with disabilities. You do have one of the Bridge sites in Dallas. If you have the ability or the opportunity at any time to know somebody or meet somebody from that Bridges program in Dallas, check it out. Same thing with Project Search. I mean, some of you may be with a Project Search site. Some of you may know folks at Project Search site. Ask them about their model. Ask them about how it's going, because you don't have to have a Bridges program or a Project Search to have a successful transition program. But you can learn and base some of what you're trying to do based on that. So the Bridges program just does a nice job of coming into mostly larger communities and getting VR school systems and the workforce agencies to kind of effectively work together. And they've had employment rates that are exceptionally high in comparison to the national averages. And the same thing with Project Search. What we love about Project Search is it's an employer-led initiative. And they are getting out of it what they need in terms of that partnership. So what makes Project Search work, in my view, is the fact that those folks that are, those employers that sign on, they get value from participating in the program, including access to good employees who are trained at their sites who happen to have disabilities. So that's a really interesting model. And I love the fact that the Bridges program also does a really nice job of incorporating the education components, which we've been saying is really important. And then the last one is this seamless transition model, which is something that Sean and I really try to put in place wherever we can, or elements of it. And it's a very simple model. It's based on the notion in terms of an outcome or goal that the first day of their adult life, when they're no longer involved with your school district, is exactly the same as their last day when they were involved with your school, which means ideally that they have paid employment out in the community with supports in place. And that is the best transition that you possibly can, and that's what makes it seamless. There is collaboration within the teams, and whenever possible, it has strong employer participation. So those are the models. Interagency roles and responsibilities, I'll turn that back over to Sean.
Yeah, just real quickly, because I know that we want to get to Eric and Jackie too, but there's an administrative side to all of this, right? So there's kind of a programmatic side that we've been talking about, but there's also a collaboration administrative side to this. And so just, you know, as you think about your programs, think about your current efforts and your future goals, know that you have to consider capacity. You have to consider your capacity to utilize the new strategies, to fund the work experiences. Transportation came up today. And then how do you support students on the work site? And again, that can be done through either your own staff, it can be done through collaborative partnerships. But these are the types of things that need to be worked through, this type of team building, this type of strategic planning to be able to execute that work-based learning effectively. And this is just a tool that we have called the flow of services, which we've used to help people identify interagency roles and responsibilities. And it's just an example of something that you could use in a work group to be able to build your team. And we just think that's important. So finally, just wanted to we'll throw it back to Dale just to talk really about, if you are going to consider social enterprises, what characteristics do we think you should keep in mind, and what TA do we have to offer?
Yeah, so quickly, this is, if you are looking at this as part of your work-based learning, we think that it's important that as many of these components as you can build into it as possible is where you would get the best opportunities to create that solid that path to employment, which includes, and the key is documenting. You know, is there an additional awareness of what's out there and what their career options are? And have we identified additional skills, aptitudes, and are there specific tasks that they've been able to complete successfully? You know, are you intentionally involving the student's family? And are you incorporating academic instruction in with what you're doing with your work experience? And are you trying to foster that notion of networks that are associated with this individual that could create opportunities for them both with a work experience, but even outside of and after they're done with school. And then it gives you a chance to really identify those necessary workplace supports. And as you brought up, some of these might be costly types of supports, but you know, test them out. Is it possible to continue to provide them? And if not, that will also tell you something. And are there clear goals, and what are they, along with the expectations and feedback in terms of how, if you have goals, are you tracking your progress towards them, essentially? And then in terms of what we can do for you, it's really anything that we've talked about that you feel you need technical support in implementing. So a lot of those questions that you were bringing up, you know, if we are provide technical assistance, we might be able to help you try to figure some of those things out. We do think that work-based learning of the 5 pre-employment transition services is key, but you want to make sure all of those services are reinforcing each other. Particularly, how do the other 4 support your efforts with work-based learning? The notion of an interagency team, you might want some help with that. Strategic planning in terms of involving particularly those students with more significant barriers to employment, building that capacity to grow what you might have. And you're a great group because it sounds like you have some things going and you want more. Well, how are you going to get more? You know, what's the plan for that? We can help facilitate that. And then making sure that these folks have the supports they need and we can train them to develop the skills they need to be successful. We also do offer on-site coaching where we would model and be involved in employer engagement, discovering assessment, family engagement, and kind of work with you hands-on. That isn't a given, it's a potential that we can provide based on the costs that are associated with it. So if there's an interest in that, there need to be more discussion about what the costs are and how we might be able to put it in place. But we just want that put on the table because we do find that the ability to kind of come on site and work with you in terms of implementing some of these things is the best way to get the skills that your team might need. So I'm going to finish there, but a lot, Eric has really said it has a lot of flexibility. You can buy things with these grants. You can use it for staff to kind of help set something up. You can use it for stipends if you have a mechanism to pay those stipends, with the idea that after you get that going, maybe those stipends would then be in the future be paid by employers or another source of money. If you need a lot of times you're wondering, how in my busy day am I going to do this? Well, maybe it can pay for somebody to kind of help you set up some of these things. So lots of possibilities, and I'll turn it over to Eric and Jackie to expand upon that.
Yeah, thank you. I also wanted to address one of our, just a comment we had in here talking about the parents paying and then we're paying them back, and that's great, but also wanted to kind of throw out there that, we can't violate fate, but it doesn't mean we can't ask anything of the families. And sometimes I think it's more merciful to ask of the families because, after they leave us, we're no longer going to be paying for transportation. We're not going to be paying for food. We're not going to be paying for all these different things, and so, some of our 18 plus programs, and we stop providing transportation because, and help the families with, okay, now how do we work this out? How do we get your child to campus and off the campus to the work site to off the work, so we're helping them so that their next step, they're not wondering, well, how do I do this? We've kind of worked this out with you on how to do that. Sorry, my dog's crying for some reason. It's him this time. And then so in the other ones, like, we said, they'll go to the 18 plus programs are going to the grocery store. We're going, every week. And so parents need to provide an allowance. Okay, so we're going to go to the grocery store. We're going to sit down. We're going to create a grocery list. We're going, and the students are required to cook themselves breakfast and lunch while they're here. And so kind of working those things out. And so asking the families to provide something is not out of the question. But that's kind of off the point of what the application, because the application, we provide you money, right? And so, and so what Dale was saying too, some of the ideas of being able to help provide training supports for trainings, and we'll get into a little bit more of that, but also I don't want to leave a little bit of time for questions, which are kind of starting to run out. But as we're talking and thinking of things, think of barriers you have to the application process, and also creating these models and start putting them in the chat so we can be addressing them. But so the application process, I will post in a minute when I get through talking another link to our website where you can find the application. We review those at the beginning of each month. And so I know that we really kind of work off a deadline. So if you want to put yourself a deadline, put it for the end of each month, because we're going to be reviewing those beginning of each month. And know too, like if you get it earlier in the month, Jackie and I will read over it and we can get back to you and give you feedback of, like, I think whenever this gets reviewed, these are some questions that you're going to be receiving. And so maybe if you can go ahead and address it before we review it, that'd be really kind of be helpful for everyone, for you. And I'll have to get those that, wait as long. And then whenever we do review the applications, oftentimes we have questions. And if we have a question for you, it's not saying that we don't like your application. It's saying that we love your application. We just need to see a little bit extra. And so we have a few more questions, but I'll go ahead and pass it on to Jackie. He's going to go over a few of those parts, but yeah, start putting in the chat barriers you have to the application. I know some of you are pretty overwhelmed by it. It looks like it's a lot, but when you get down to it, it's really not as much as you think. And then also what we're looking for is the same thing you're looking for in a good transition plan. You're looking for, do we have a solid foundation to move forward from? Because we know that that's going to change a bit. And the same thing, we need just this. Without a solid foundation, you can't really move forward. Just like the student's not going to be able to move forward as well. Even if the reality of it is probably going to change once they leave us. It's probably going to change once you get that funding, right? But we just need to see a solid foundation. So Jackie, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Real quick, and y'all have access to this PowerPoint too. And a lot of what Dale and Sean talked about are so helpful with a lot of these specific areas of the application. So kind of, the big six that we're looking for, maybe you could move on to the next slide. The first thing you'll notice when you are looking at the application, when you first look at it, even when I first looked at it, it looked very overwhelming. But once I kind of started going through the different components, it's really not. A lot of them just build on each other. A lot of the sections, what you are going to want to have is a committee or a team of people that are going to work with you throughout the process of the the money, right? Definitely you'll need somebody who is not part of the school. That could be somebody that's from your community. That could be your workforce, your counselor. But also consider not making it a super huge team, because it gets really unyieldy when you are working with a whole lot of people, and we completely understand that. Move on to number 2, please. You will also notice that there is a lot of conversation about sustainability. What we want to see is that you have just a plan, an idea of how you would sustain this project beyond just the funding that you would have. It doesn't mean that you're going to have to stick to that 100%. It doesn't mean that, if you said this is going to happen, then you need this to happen. It really is just an opportunity for you to look at different opportunities like profits, sponsorships, and business partnerships in your communities. So just have something in place where you can extend that project beyond, like I said, just that initial funding. You're also going to need to touch on explaining how you're going to have that community partnership and that collaboration. That's really what Sean and Dale talks about a lot, really, is moving beyond just those boundaries of the school and making sure that your students are getting those experiences in the community and working and having those opportunities to learn those employability skills and essentially to get them to work. And of course, Eric will jump in as he needs to. It does have a section where you need to talk about your pre-ed skills. Please don't feel that you have to force explanation of all areas when you may not really be going over or working on one skill or the other. We understand that a lot of them do kind of work overlap and work on each other, but don't feel that you have to, like make up stuff just to fill out, every section. If you're going to do workplace readiness and do that really well, just explain that really well. But you'll probably figure out that, of course, they all kind of overlap each other as well. Number 5, we also want to see some plan for evaluation, how you're going to evaluate the students. How are we going to know that they are gaining those work skills that they need? Before and afters, checklists. We all know about progress monitoring and what that looks like for our students with disabilities. We just want to see what that looks like, what your plan is for that. We also know that might change also throughout the process. What you start with is not going to be what you finish with, but we definitely want to see that you have a plan in place. And of course, Eric and I, and eventually Sean and Dale will be able to support you with that as well as you move through your new kind of adventures with your students. And finally, just a timeline, an outline of what you're doing is just really helpful. An itemized list of the materials that you hope to purchase, but also budgeting it in things like training, funds for different times of the school year. We know that the school year is really crazy. If you apply for the funds in November, don't think that you're going to get the funds December 1st. There's a huge, there's just time involved with all that as well. Keep in mind that you may not get funds for a month or two, but that's fine. During that month or two, you could put into place a lot of the other planning, right? Working with your team, creating additional things. So we just want to see that you've thought through a potential timeline for the next year or two with your students and with your new endeavors. So just something, it doesn't have to look beautiful like this, just something that we know that you have had some you've really put thought into it, you can start with the end in mind and really just put into the different times, the different months. Consider, of course, the Christmas break, spring break, the summer, all those kind of things and really just think about and dream about what you want those next stages to look like for you. 18 plus programs are involved in this. Don't feel that it has to be a, junior and senior high school situation. And that's it. Yep. 660.
Yeah.
Like,
So, I mean,
that's
so
it.
just can you put the poll as well?
Yes,
the
yes.
info, because for some reason
One quick info too.
Just-
We are curious to see if you all are planning to submit an application. We know that, of course, it is already November. If you all are in the process of writing it up and you think you'll be able to, send it in ASAP, or of course, end of this year, early next year, just know and keep in mind that Eric and I are here to support you along the way. If you have questions, like Eric said, and you need to meet with us before, you want us to meet with your team, you want to flesh out some ideas, that's what we're here for. And we are more than happy to sit and chat and talk about different things. We're also familiar, of course, with the different regions of Texas and how resources are different. I'm from South Texas myself. I think I saw some people from the Valley in here. Eric is from, the Lubbock area. And so we really like the idea of getting creative with you all and really kind of helping you troubleshoot some ideas, whatever you all want to do.
Yeah, and also like kind of the urgency, maybe the sense of urgency of got to get it done. That you mean, and then not, I guess that's not what I meant to say, but like, so you're overwhelmed right now, and we know that a lot of people are very overwhelmed, kind of getting things going, and just because you apply, like say you're able to like turn your application in tomorrow, we review it next week, we get back to you, and boom, we accept it right away, right? You probably still won't see the money until January or February. So just because you turn in now doesn't mean you're going to see the money right away. It's still going to take a while. We try to do our part to get to it as quick as possible, but what we've experienced is the school districts. I mean, there's a lot of you have to go through your business services, and they have a lot of checks boxes they have to check off and those sort of things. So it's going to take a while. I mean, I would think if you waited till January and you feel it completed, then you might not even start till the next August. If you wait till the summer, you might be not even starting till January. I mean, it really takes a while for these things to really kind of kick off. And then, so we have a good question here. What are the funds be applied to? I mean, really just think outside the box. I mean, we really, the only thing we've really talked about as being something that's we might question, but you can answer in there, is if you're wanting us to pay for something the school would typically pay for, like, hey, we want you to, we need a copy machine, and we need paper, and we need these other things that typically a school would pay for. And we do understand that sometimes schools don't provide that. So just let us know how, like, why it is that you need this, and then how it's going to be sustainable. And I think that's the biggest question to what will we pay for and not pay for is, is this still going to be sustainable, right? Once the funds have run out and we've paid for this, how are you going to continue to provide that services, those supports? And so, one of those things that I think helps really be sustainable is training. We talked about, kind of alluded to that. And so you could pay for training. Maybe you need to pay for someone to come in, provide training, is something that we're not doing, or sending people somewhere for training. That's something we could pay for. Or, like, I know oftentimes it's really hard to even have the time to get your staff to training. If your district approves, maybe this could pay for a sub, while you and your paraprofessionals all went to training or attended training, right? I mean, that really helps a program be sustainable, is if everyone has the training to follow through with those things. Trying to think of some other things that we've mentioned in the past. Can you think of things we've mentioned, Jackie, but just anything that can help it be sustainable, for sure. I mean, like, some people ask about the transportation. Yeah, we can pay for transportation, but again, what's the long-term plan to make this sustainable? And, that spoke with one district in South Texas, and they were going to be partnering up with Amazon, with an Amazon distribution center. And so their only issue really was the transportation, so, like, start getting involved in those conversations with that business of, okay, we're going to do this. And then, once they kind of start seeing the value in that, hey, would you provide, support? Would you provide, sponsorship? Then we can help pay for that transportation once this funding no longer provides for that. Do you have any specific questions, something you're thinking of that you're not sure if it would pay for? And you can unmute yourself if you like.
Hi,
Go ahead.
my question regarding the funds was like, there was no specifics about exactly what we could use it, but you just gave some examples. But I was thinking kind of outside the box here. So one of the issues that our program is having is we're trying to get into an old building that belongs to the school system. That we're trying to get funds for, like materials that we could actually work on employment training skills with our kiddos to help them paint the rooms, things like that, to set it up that's located closer to our community so that they can access from that building some of the community employees or employers that we want to try to situate our kids on work-based learning type of program with. And this way we don't have to rely on transportation, because that's a whole other issue. So that we could be able to walk to these locations, which is what some of our families tend to do who live in the center of town. But I'm thinking about, I know you can't buy us a new building, but would you be able to, with your friends, provide some materials that could help us restore that building to make it accessible for our kiddos?
Yeah, I mean, that would be awesome. That'd be great. I mean, to be able to create an offsite 18+ program or a work-based learning program. Yeah, I mean, I think that's an excellent idea. I know that one of the districts that I taught in the Houston area, we had a community college near us, and they had like the old school that they were using as, we went there and we were looking around like, how can we kind of plug into this space? And they had an old 1-room school that they were now using for storage. And so then we were able to convert that, but we didn't have this funding available. So we had to tap into the community, into the families. But yeah, you could tap into us. I mean, that's exactly what we can do. That's a great idea.
Awesome. Thank you. We will be applying soon.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love that. And just, think about, your supplies, start budgeting that, start getting your itemized things. And again, that's also just so that you have an idea, right? Like there's opportunity for with the RFP to provide additional support once those funds are used, or if something else comes up, there are additional supports. And I would love to have Dale and Sean come down and get you through the next level also at some point. So there really is the opportunity to not just get you started, but then to really push you through as new issues come up and you got to work through things. So yeah, that's a really great opportunity. And where are you from?
We're located in Mercedes, South Texas, Rio Grande Valley, 956 area. Yes.
Hey, that's awesome. That's super exciting. Yep.
Yes, and it's exciting because we've been working on it. This has been a dream, and I think our lead person for the Transition Academy is on with me today. And this has been our dream, and we're working, trying to get this going, but there's always some kind of a stump or something that we trip over, and it hasn't come to fruition. And I'm thinking we're missing out on opportunities to get our kids exposed to this environment and to our community. And because transportation, we're a small community, all our businesses are on one street pretty much. There might be a few businesses on the back street, but that's pretty much it. So it's not such a difficult thing. It's just getting that location set up and other things come ahead of this. But that's our goal, and that's why I was asking about how we could get y'all to come in to support us as well with coaching and how to get this program booming. I think we have right now quite a few high school kiddos that we could start it in the transition program, but then eventually or really quickly try to give it access to our seniors that are getting ready to transition and who may not be interested in staying behind for the Transition Academy, but we haven't been able to put them out in the field. And so we're trying to get this off the ground. And I'm thinking if we could dangle a few things like this to our powers that be above us, they may be a little bit more supportive and say, hey, well, this is willing to work with y'all. Maybe we can support as well.
Yeah. And
open doors.
Yeah, and you brought up another point of something else that I thought of, we could, that can be helpful for districts, like you say, even having the resources to get this started, like the time resources, right? To even get this started, like you have the idea, but you don't have the time to get in there. And so, we've talked with other districts, especially some of the smaller districts, thinking like, hey, if I had, if we had these relationships built, then we'd be able to do these things. Well, maybe this funding could go towards, again, if your district allows, like a part-time, maybe retired teacher or some staff member that can then go in and build these relationships, get these things going. So then now you're able to move into there and you're having, things are going. Cause yeah, I mean, time is also a resource that sometimes we're lacking. And so this could help pay for that timing for that resource as well, be another idea. And then, thinking another thought of like, and of course, school-based enterprises, that's definitely one. I think a lot of people will allow come into their mind, and that's generally we expect will be the majority of them. But we also like to see, new ideas and creative ideas and thinking out of the box ideas too. And as much as we can see that, the better, the more exciting. But we know that this is how it's going to happen. But another thought is, project search. There's getting out into the community or setting up in the business. There's costs involved in setting up in those businesses. Maybe your community cannot support a project search, but you could support something along those lines of setting up in one business is a variety of businesses. This is something that can help you set up into those businesses, because like maybe you need a little bit of a workspace in there and you need computer, you need laptop, you need things that, printer and just materials and stuff that allow you to be set up in the community. This can do that for you, And so kind of thinking outside the box again, like, how you have the PowerPoint, sorry, the purposeful life. Ah, my goodness. You know what I was saying, right?
Yeah.
What was I saying? Project search.
Stop
Project
talking,
search.
Eric. Stop talking.
Project search. Whether you outgrown it or you need a new one, or you need to create something along those lines for yourself. Yeah.
Also know that you don't have to request the whole 10 grand. Like if you are $5 grand and 10 grand can be really overwhelming at first. So just know that you don't have to request the whole amount. We urge you to, like, we want you all to have this money. We help us give you this money. Like that is the whole point. The more students we see working and out into the community and really building those relationships, the happier we're all going to be, and the better off the students are going to be. So just know that we recognize that there's differences across Texas. We know that there's a lot of specific challenges, but then there are also really specific opportunities that you all have. And so we urge you all to just consider if it's now or early January, and even if you just need that time, and that if you get those funds in January, you'll be able to start planning and doing some of the back work in the spring, and then move forward. There's all kinds of ways to do this.
Yeah, and I had a direct message asking about, if we have to pay this back or match in the district, and that's not something that we're requiring. Also, something we're not requiring is we're not going to be holding you accountable. So you say, hey, I'm going to create this program is exactly like this, and we're going to spend money exactly on these things, and we're not holding you accountable to that. I mean, we're going to continue to follow up, but we're going to continue to follow up for providing support, not to check in and make sure that you've spent the money exactly like this. Because we did something before with capacity building. I know I've had some districts that they came back and they want to give me their list. Here's what we spent, or they spend it and then ask for the money, and it's like, that's not what we're asking. We are wanting you to have a good plan in place, and then however that needs to look like for you, great. And we're not going to hold you accountable that it looks exactly that way, and so you don't have to come back and tell us whether you did or you didn't, or if you spend it differently. Now this comes out of it. Now this comes out of your budget, not ours. That's not how we're going to do that. So there's the accountability is more of just us checking in and how can we help.
Right, because we understand that enterprises are a monster in themselves. Businesses the same, students the same. There's all kinds of change that you have no idea is going to happen, and so we recognize that, and TWC recognizes that, and so we want to make sure that you have the money that you need for support. And we know that if something changes, prices go up, all those kind of adjustments happen, and we recognize that they're going to happen. And so your whole model might change. Just know that we're here to support you along the way when that happens.
Yeah, and we had the question about, is it one per district, but no, I mean, it's, different schools. I think it'd be hesitant if like more than one program within the school applied, but if you had 5 high schools and all 5 high schools applied, that's fine, or a few different transition programs and those applied, perfect. So,
and it'd be great, if you're having that opportunity, and I don't know, for example, the Valley, if, there's city after town after city after town and all kinds of schools, find opportunities to collaborate with them. $10,000 is great, but $20,000 is even better. And if you can get 2 schools to collaborate, or 2, different towns, well, you just have a lot more opportunities. So just think of it that way also. It's not, just one school, you get this and that's it. We really are wanting to find creative ways to push the limits with these funds.
right. And it's students with disabilities, whether that's a 504 plan or IEP, so that's another way maybe to kind of build that foundation, especially for the smaller districts. That is like, we don't really have the students to build a solid program. You can pull them from your 504 students, or you can also pull it from all over the, from lower grades. It doesn't have to be high school students. I mean, there's one district that they're going to be working with elementary students all the way up to their 18+ students, pulling in 504 and IEP students, because all of them have something they need to work on and learn. And how cool is that your district's small enough you can do that? So we're definitely past time, so I don't want to keep you all waiting. I mean, it looks like I'm sure everyone's dropping off if they need to, but any other last minute questions before we go and let y'all head out? And we really appreciate these questions. This is really nice. We like that. Anything, Dale, you can think of that maybe we didn't? No?
No.
All right, cool.
Wonderful.
You're welcome. And thank y'all again for attending. And we will be holding again Friday. Again, the slides will be it will be different and covering it a little bit differently, but essentially the same training. Yeah.
Awesome. Wonderful.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Y'all have a good day. Great week.
Bye.
Bye.